We're really pleased to have Delegate Regina Boyce here today, who introduced last session the Maryland Paint Stewardship Bill. I don't know how many of you had a chance to watch the video of that hearing. It was quite interesting. Delegate Boyce was born in Washington, D.C. to Caribbean parents who immigrated to the United States from Jamaica and Barbados, and she received her bachelor's of kinesiology. I'm sure I mispronounced that. I'll let you fix, and also explain what that is, and psychology from Towson University, and she holds a master's in public administration from the University of Baltimore. She was elected delegate in the 43rd District in 2018, where she serves on the Environment and Transportation Committee, and she's assigned to the Environment and the Motor Vehicle and Transportation Subcommittee. So welcome, Delegate Boyce. And let me introduce also Heidi McAuliffe. She's Vice President at the American Coatings Association. And we also have Metz Kasemeyer of Swartz, Metz and Wise. And Pam is the firm's managing partner and has represented a variety of interests before the Maryland General Assembly and regulatory agencies for more than 30 years. So these three are going to tell us about paint stewardship. And the stewardship idea is really central to zero waste issues and extended producer responsibility. So we welcome all three of you.
Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you for the team for having us here. Well, first and foremost, yes, I have my undergraduate degree from Towson University in kinesiology. It is the study of human movement. It was the rename of the past, what folks would call physical education degree. So my minor was psychology because I was going to be a sports psychologist, and here I am, a delegate. So you know, things change over the years. And so I'm honored to be here, and I'm proud to be here with these two ladies who are pretty awesome. Pam brought this bill to me last summer, and I, at the recommendation actually of our chairman, Kumar Bavre, and I read it and I said, I love it, let's do it. And quite frankly, given COVID, it would have gone certainly a lot farther, and I certainly know that it was going to certainly pass because it did pass the House. But our chairman assures us that it will be the first bill, which has already been refiled, that will, one of the first that will get out of committee so we can get it back on the House floor, and so that we can just wrestle with it in the Senate. So very quickly, House Bill 890, the Maryland Stewardship Program Bill, is essentially establishes the paint care program in Maryland, one of 9, including DC, and then 2 newly created ones, and the ladies can correct me if I'm wrong, in Washington State and New York. If it would have passed this session, we would have been the 12th established in the country, and we will know, we'll get to that next year. But you know, 10% of all paint purchased in the United States, which is about 78 million gallons per year, goes unused. And according to the Paint Stewardship Institute, it costs an average of $8 per gallon to recycle, which means it costs more than $500 million to manage end-of-life paint in the US. So about 80% of paint can be recycled into new paint. And so paint care, essentially created by the American Coatings Association, which you'll hear from Heidi, paint manufacturers with the goal of decreasing paint waste and recycling more post-consumer paint by setting up drop-off stations within each state. The program, of course, accepts architectural paint, specifically latex house paint, oil-based paints, primers, stains, sealers, and varnishes, and shellacs at about 5 gallons or less. The program will be, of course, funded by a fee and not a deposit or a tax. And we like to push that out there because we did get pushback from the Retailers Association. This is just like the tire fee, as my good friend Pam says. So it's going to be placed on each container of paint at wholesale, for which resale can be passed on to the consumer, provided that they provide information and educational materials. But most importantly, once it's establish where those drop-off centers will be. How does this program essentially work? In a nutshell, it creates partnerships with different hardware stores, but most importantly, municipalities, to create your more than frequent drop-off stations for paint. So right now, if you're in a municipality, you know, your government has a 2 times a year, maybe 3 times a year, we can drop off hazardous materials. And you know, it's good when it's good, but you know, there's most of us that have about, probably, I just cleaned out my basement. I definitely have about 20 gallons of paint in my basement. And so it'd be nice to be able to drop that off at any time during the year versus those special times a year. And what that does is create that opportunity to do so within a 15-mile radius. But it also, so you don't have to wait. It also saves municipalities their money that they also use to kind of create these hazardous waste days. And so the best part about this, as I always say, this is probably one of the best examples of an extender producer responsibility. Here you have an association saying, we've got this needed product, yet we have this product that we know has some issues, and we're going to create this program so we can kind of continue to, you know, it's a part of the reduce, reuse, recycle. We're going to find out how we can use most of this. And then of course, that 15% that can't be recycled, of course, kept out of our landfill, kept out of our incinerators, but properly disposed of. And so, as you can see, you know, with some extended, there are about 119 PR laws in the country, 14 products in 33 states and DC. And so, you know, things like syringes and mattresses and batteries and so on and so forth. So, you know, if this is passed, and I keep saying it will be passed, I'm just going to speak it into existence. It will be passed this coming session, no matter how we have session. This will be an excellent example of a program that not only it pays, we pay for it, but we pay for it in so many ways, and that we will be paying for it so that we can properly dispose of it. But it's a working EPR. It's a working EPR. And so other programs that say they have EPR, you know, we still see a lot of that stuff in the waste stream. And so this is an excellent example, an excellent model of the industry saying they want to take responsibility and not necessarily being forced to create that responsibility. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Heidi.
Okay. You know, I think you've already covered all the really good relevant points, Delegate Boyce, but I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so we're going to look at it. So thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Delegate Boyce, for getting the bill reintroduced again. I'm really thrilled to be able to, you know, focus our energies on getting this bill done in Maryland in this session coming up. So I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. So I really want to give you just a little bit of background about how this program started. In the early 2000s, the Product Stewardship Institute, PSI, came to us and said, look, we want to talk about leftover paint. And our response as an industry was, well, we've been talking about leftover paint for 20 years. We've been, you know, building different types of programs. We've been responding to legislation across the country. We saw what was happening in Canada with some programs up there, and we've been dealing with this issue for a long time. So, you know, what can you tell us about it? And PSI said, we're going to bring experts from the environmental agencies across the country, some folks from the NGO community. We want you to bring paint manufacturers to the table, and we want to sit down and see if we can figure out if there is a way to deal with this particular waste stream because of the significant costs that it was putting on municipalities. And so our board of directors agreed. Wasn't easy to get them to agree, but they did. And we sat down over the course of really about 3 or 4 years and talked about this. We had about 9 different, 4 meetings within 9 months. We came up with our very first agreement with this group and said, okay, here are some things that we agree on. Let's see what we can, let's see what we can develop out of these common points of agreement. And then we continued working. And at the end of this process in 2007, we actually came up with the elements of a program that we thought we could put into legislation. And we agreed as an association that we would work towards passing this legislation first as a pilot program and you know, as a true pilot, see how it was going to work. And then maybe if we had to tweak it a little, we would tweak it, but then we would try to move this program across the country. And that's basically what we did. And I just want to give you an idea of some of the folks who signed this agreement with us in 2007. It was the environmental agencies from California, Connecticut, Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, New Jersey, Oregon, and Washington. And then we had cities and counties and municipalities represented from Florida, Minnesota, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington, as well as groups like Earth 911, the Product Stewardship Council Environment, NAMA, and a group called Curbside, as well as EPA's Office of Policy and EPA's Office of Solid Waste. And in addition to those folks, we had a bunch of paint manufacturers that were involved in this conversation as well. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this, you know, these agreed upon elements were. Are you seeing my slides okay?
No, we're not seeing them. Have you done a screen share button? Have you seen that share screen at the bottom, green button?
Let me see. How about now?
Yep, we see it now.
Okay, I apologize for that. I think I forgot to hit the button. I think I almost had to call you there, Delegate Boyce.
I was just about to interrupt you and ask if the PowerPoint was up. Glad we got that out.
My apologies. So that's how we arrived at the program. So if you fast forward now to the current time frame, here's what the program looks like now. I mean, we have 11 jurisdictions plus the District of Columbia that has active operating programs. So this is our map. As you can see, we're heavy on the West Coast. We've got that northeast corner almost colored in green. We're working on New Hampshire and Massachusetts so that we get that all colored in. And then we have Minnesota and Colorado in the middle of the country with the District of Columbia as well. But it is statewide legislation. We work state by state. And the legislation itself actually contains sort of the sustainable financing mechanism, as well as requirements that are consistent across the country. One of the reasons that we're successful in implementing this program is it really is the same program state to state. As I indicated a few minutes ago, we started this pilot program in the state of Oregon, and it was a pilot. The legislature there approved the program for a certain number of years. I think it was 3 years. My memory's fading on that right now, but it was 3 or 4 years. And at the end of those 3 or 4 years, we were able to convince the legislature to turn this into a permanent program. So Oregon was our very first state. And then you can see our timeline moving forward. Last year was a pretty exciting year for us as we did pass Washington State, and New York State, and we are currently working on getting those programs up and operating. We've been delayed, just as everybody else has been delayed because of the pandemic. A lot of our work in setting up this program is field work. We're out in the field talking to the municipalities, the HHW folks, and recruiting retailers. And we have not been able to do that because of COVID. So we're a little bit behind in getting these programs started, but we're determined and we'll get there. So what does the statute looks like? And I think the one thing that everybody needs to remember is this is a program that places a requirement on paint manufacturers. Paint manufacturers under our legislation cannot sell paint into the state unless they set up a system for recycling and proper management of leftover paint, or they participate in a stewardship program that will run that system, run that waste management system for them. So every single manufacturer who sells paint into one of our paint care states has to be registered either with us or they have to run their own program. And I'll tell you consistently across our programs, none of our manufacturers want to do this on their own. They all participate with the stewardship program. And our stewardship organization is called Paint Care. American Coatings Association is the trade association for paint manufacturers. That's who I work for. We set up the stewardship organization, and all of our manufacturers who are members, and even manufacturers of paint who are not members, have agreed to participate with that organization. So the law requires the Product Stewardship Organization, Paint Care, to develop a program plan, and it has to be submitted to the state oversight agency, which is usually the environmental agency in the state. And in that plan, we basically describe exactly how this program works. We have a standard for convenience. One of the absolute foundations of the program is that residents and consumers will bring back leftover paint if it's convenient for them. So we define convenience very specifically in this statute. We define it as a collection location or a drop-off site within 15 miles of every single resident. For areas that are very high density areas, for instance, like Baltimore City, that's probably not enough drop-off locations. So we have another convenience standard for high density locations, which adds drop-off locations for those types of areas. For very rural areas, we might not have any type of an HHW facility or a MRF or even retail locations that are within 15 miles of every resident. So we have to do something alternative for those rural areas. And for those rural areas, we establish individual pickup days, or hazardous household or paint days, actually. So if we can't find any retail and there's nowhere else that we can find any place to be a drop-off location, we serve those rural areas with alternative methods. But that's how we define convenience. So the plan has to demonstrate how we're going to make these drop-off locations convenient for all residents. It also requires us to manage this waste stream in a responsible way, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then other methods after that. So the hierarchy, the EPA hierarchy, is built into the statute and absolutely guides how we make decisions. It also requires really vigorous education and outreach for the residents of the state. So we actually designate a certain amount of our budget for the program to educate and use all forms of outreach for that. Also, of course, we have to have a budget, and we have to develop the paint fee, which actually funds this program. And that is described in our program plan as well. So all of that is required under the statute. All of that is sent to the environmental agency for approval before we start doing any work. Also required in the statute is an annual report. So once we're up and operating, we have an annual report that is due to our oversight agency, which talks about the disposition for every single can of paint that we collect, how it's just, how it's managed. It's an independent financial audit as well. It also gives a report on all of the outreach and education that we've done and provides an evaluation of our program goals. As I said, that's an annual report that we provide every single year. This program is really a zero cost program for the environmental agency. For all of the time that the agency spends reviewing our program plan and the annual report and any compliance activities that they engage in, we pay for. In some of our states, it's a flat fee. We get a bill from the agency that says, all right, your annual fee is X amount of dollars, and we pay the agency for their time. Other states, they send us a bill on an hourly basis. So we do try to make sure that this is a zero cost program for the state. Now, let me talk a little bit about the funding mechanism. So Delegate Boyce described sort of how this works. Paint manufacturers estimate what their sales are going to be in the state. It will then, and all of this happens actually when we're developing our program plan, when we're trying to figure out exactly what our budget is going to be for the state of Maryland. We'll be talking to paint manufacturers to try to determine what their estimated sales are going to be. We will also be talking to transporters and processors in the state so that we can determine what our costs are going to be. Collection, transport, and processing are really the biggest fees that we pay in this program. So that's really going to be a big factor in setting the budget for the program. What I'm showing you on the screen is really the initial schedule of fees that we've developed for other states. This has changed a little bit. No fee for a half pint or smaller, that's the same. For larger than a half pint and up to or smaller than 1 gallon is 35 cents, actually could range between 35 and 45 cents. For 1 gallon can, it is 75 cents to 99 cents. For 1 gallon up to a 2 gallon, it's 95 cents. And then for larger than 1 gallon up to a 5 gallon, it's $1.60 up to $1.99 on that particular size container. So you can see it's a smaller fee for a smaller container, larger fee for a larger container. And those are the fees that the consumer pays. Manufacturers, as I said, they estimate what their sales are in the state. They use that fee to multiply times their sales. They send a check to Paint Care, and that's the revenue that this program runs on. As paint is sold throughout the state, that fee is passed down to the retailer and from the retailer to the consumer. So the manufacturer is reimbursed for their costs, and the retailer is reimbursed for their costs, and the consumer is paying the fee that you see up there on the screen. Okay, and as I said, the largest fees that we pay, the biggest part of our budget goes for transportation and processing. That's really the heart and soul of this program. We're going to set up, a couple of hundred location sites across the state of Maryland. So we're going to have a transporter moving from location to location to location, picking up leftover paint from retailers, from HHW facilities, from MRFs, from the municipalities. That is really the biggest part of our cost. And then these other items here, are expense items as well, but not nearly what at the level of the transportation and processing. The transportation and processing is about 75% of the cost to operate this program. Then we also provide retailers and all drop-off sites, not just retailers, but we provide them with all the supplies that they need, including the bins and, you know, spill kits and any other supplies that they may need. We give them point of sale information so that they're giving information to their consumers about where the closest drop-off locations are. We do provide this point of sale outreach and all the advertising that we do in multiple languages. We do have a staff person that administers each particular state. In some of our larger states, that's more than one person. For instance, in California, I think we have 5 people right now working, and I anticipate we'll probably have more than one for New York as well. I think Maryland, we would probably only have 1, but that remains to be seen. And then there are some other fees that kind of round out our budget there. And just to give you an idea of what the drop-off network looks like, the first thing we do when a bill is passed in the state is our executive director will come out and visit every single county and talk to the, you know, the county-run facilities, find out what their paint waste stream looks like, talk to them about our program, and hopefully sign everybody up at the county level to participate as a collection site. And as you know, that's the infrastructure that currently exists. That plus, you know, transfer stations or recycling centers, those things. We visit all of those places physically, hopefully get everybody to sign up as a drop-off center for us. And then, you know, like I said, at that point, that's the infrastructure that currently exists. Then our job after that is to go out into the community and develop the rest of those drop-off sites that are going to help us meet our convenience standard. And we do that by going to retail locations that sell paint, are familiar with paint, or somehow have some affiliation with paint so that there's a level of knowledge there with this particular commodity. Paint stores, hardware stores, lumber stores, reuse stores, home improvement stores. Those are the places that, you know, will end up being about 75 to 80% of the drop-off locations across Maryland. You know, so if you as a consumer, when you go to buy your paint, it could be that the most convenient place for you to drop it off is right where you bought it. Or it may be some other location, and that's fine. We have a locator service for all of residents across the country to use to try to determine what's the most convenient location for them. And we'll have all of that loaded up for the state of Maryland once we get this network developed. As I mentioned earlier, we will do paint collection events for those areas where we're unable to identify any retail locations that can become a drop-off place. So we'll do paint collection events. And then one thing I have not mentioned is we actually have a direct pickup service for small businesses or CSQG businesses that collect over 200 gallons at a time. Folks like paint contractors and schools and prisons and hotels and home improvement contractors and things, those folks tend to have a huge inventory of leftover paint. And one of the things that we discovered early on when we were still working first in just Oregon and California is that we didn't want folks like that bringing their paint to retail locations because a retail location can't handle that type of volume. So we developed this direct pickup service that if you have 200 gallons or more, you can call us and we'll send a transporter to your facility and just pick it right up. You don't have to take it anywhere. So it's a tremendous cost saver for those businesses. We not only free up their warehouse or their storage room or whatever, but they don't have to transport it. We just take it right off their hands. So that's really what our network of drop-off looks like. And like I said, we have a convenience standard. that we work very hard to meet. Hard to say what it would look like in Maryland right now, but I'm excited to find out. And I just want to give you, again, just an overview of some of the results that we've had over the 10 years that we've been running this program. So there's the list of our active states: Colorado, California, Connecticut, DC, Oregon, Maine, Minnesota, Rhode Island, Vermont. Our convenience metric right now in all of our states across the country, in those 9 programs, 97.7% of the population in those states have a drop-off location either within 15 miles of them, where they have multiple ones within 15 miles, or we have done events in their location to make sure that that convenience is met. So we're pretty proud of that. We really believe that paint comes in because we make it easy for them. One of the things that we have to do is to make sure all the paint manufacturers in each state are complying with the law. So they have to register not only with the stewardship organization, they have to register with the state agency. And in these 9 states or 11 states across the country, we have over 200 manufacturers that are currently participating. And it's a little bit different list in each state. It's not the same list of manufacturers because there are still family-owned companies that are regional or just smaller business, regional manufacturers. There are folks working or making paint in California, and their paint stays in California. It's not on the East Coast, so it is a little bit different list in each state. So in those programs across the country, we have almost 1,800 year-round permanent collection locations. We've done over 4,800 HHW events, usually in partnership with the municipality or the MRFs. We've done 339 paint-only events. Like I said, those are typically in rural areas where we don't have retail that's available to help us be a location there. And then those direct pickups that I just talked about a few seconds ago, we've done over 4,000 of those. Those are really popular. We have some small businesses that they're just constantly amassing leftover paint. So we actually put them on a schedule. We have a reoccurring schedule for pickup at certain types of businesses. And that's been a very effective way to bring this waste stream, in. So in total, we've collected over 42 million gallons of paint since the inception of the program, since 2010. And still going strong. I mean, once we have New York and Washington State up and running, that 42 million gallons will increase exponentially. So we are working hard to get them moving. And we've always had actually a very aggressive program of trying to expand across the country. So we're typically trying to get this bill passed in 4 to 5 states almost every year. So this year we were working in New Jersey, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And we still have bills pending in New Jersey and Massachusetts. And if it's possible for the legislature to focus on stewardship and they get their business done on the budget and the COVID response activities, I'm still very hopeful that we might get this bill passed in those states. In New Jersey, we actually passed it through the legislature last year, got it to the governor's desk, and he didn't get to it in time to sign it. So I think we'll get it through the legislature again in New Jersey. So I'm excited to start working again 2021 in Maryland. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the disposition of the material that we collect. So this is a slide from our Connecticut program. It was actually delivered at a New York recycling seminar or meeting in October of 2019. and it was presented by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And this gives a pretty good picture of how much paint we're collecting in that state and how much of the latex is recycled. And I think in Connecticut, we're actually pretty fortunate that we are recycling a higher percentage of the leftover paint in Connecticut than we are actually nationwide. So our nationwide numbers are a little bit lower than this for latex, but this was actually a ready-made slide, so I thought it was a good one to show. But I do want to share with you as well what that disposition looks like for latex and for oil-based paint. So, and I just got these numbers Friday. So for latex paint, for water-based paint, 66% of the latex paint that we collect in this program is recycled back into a paint product. So it's a recycled content paint product. 5% is reused. So we actually partner with Habitat for Humanity and some other types of reuse stores. And when we get product that comes in, sometimes it can go right back on the shelf as is. And that's what that reuse is. So that's 5% for reuse. Some of it is used for as an additive in concrete products. Some of it is used for as alternative daily cover, pretty small percentages, and 6% of it is landfilled. So there's 6% of this latex product that comes in and it's damaged or it's frozen or somehow we can't do anything with it, and that portion of it is disposed in a landfill. Like I said, that's 6%. So that's the latex side of it. The oil-based side obviously is a little different. There are actually no companies operating in the United States that are recycling oil-based paint into paint. There's one company that we know of that is located in Canada, and they're doing some of this work, and they are talking about opening a facility in the United States, but at the moment, there really is no processor in the United States for oil-based paint. So we have 0% of oil-based paint that's recycled to paint, but 65% of it is burned for energy recovery. So that is really where the bulk of oil-based paint is being sent, and then 30% of it is just incinerated as well. So that's the breakdown for disposition of the collected material for paint care. And I think that was the last slide that I had prepared for you. So I am happy to answer any questions, or if there's some details that I left out or something you want to hear talk a little bit further about, I'm happy to do so.
And I want to see if Pam, you wanted to say anything.
Between you and Heidi, I think you've covered most everything. I think what I did want to re-emphasize is the program's desire to work with the local jurisdictions to supplement and enhance what they're already doing, or to help save the local jurisdictions resources that they can then reuse, no pun intended. They can reallocate for other kinds of services. And I did want to make one not clarification, but on the oil-based paint that Heidi was just talking about, and the lack of recyclability, that's largely contracting through the cement kilns. This isn't going to your average. The program's not sending it to your average incinerator waste to energy issue. They work with like cement kilns and others that are going to need this product anyway. And hopefully the company in Canada or others will begin to see processes for addressing the oil-based paint, which is a small minority of the paint to begin with. And the latex is really, as you saw, the very high percentages of what is recycled and reused has been the predominant focus, but we don't want to not take back the oil-based paint because it still gets managed in a much more efficient manner.
Yeah, and if I could just say one more thing, one detail that I neglected to share with you is sort of our relationship with the municipal facilities and sort of how that works, how we help them save money. So as I said, our executive director would come out and visit all the municipal facilities. And it is our sincere hope that we can sign up all these facilities to work with us. And the benefit for those facilities is if you sign up as a drop-off location with Paint Care, we will then pay for all of the transportation and processing costs for that facility's paint waste stream. They can continue doing exactly what they're doing. If they document for us how much of it is paint, we will pay the transportation and processing directly. And those will be costs that that municipality does not incur. So for instance, a couple weeks ago, I was on a call with Colorado, where we have a program. And they shared with me some numbers that at the beginning of our program there, one of their municipalities saved $130,000 because they signed up with Paint Care. And the $130,000 was the first year. By the third year, they were saving $170,000 in that municipality. So that's money that they did not have to spend for that municipality.
Thanks a lot, Heidi and Delegate Boyce. Do people have questions? I saw Amy, you had a couple questions to start out? And I see Lily. I'm going to write a list down so we don't step on each other. Amy, Lily, anyone else raising their hand?
Amy had one from the chat.
Yeah, Amy, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So Montgomery County already has a pretty extensive paint recycling program. And I was just wondering, for the lake, you already explained what happens to some of the oil-based paint, but what ended up happening to the latex paint that that can no longer be reused, that's hardened in the cans, and it really doesn't have any more use for actually used as paint?
So, so for paint that, paint that's been frozen and thawed over several seasons, or it looks like it might be contaminated with some other non-paint type of constituent, we really can't do anything with that. That paint is put in the landfill. And like I said, that's only 6% of the latex paint that we collect nationwide.
And then yeah.
I'm sorry, Amy. I also wanted to raise, not really specific to your question, but the other thing the program does, when Heidi made reference to the outreach and education requirements within the program plan that gets approved by the state, they create and provide to the retailers and others a tremendous amount of information that the consumer gets when they purchase paint to help them know the volumes to purchase, what their options are when they're done. So there's a lot of point of sight or point of sale education and outreach that hopefully begins to manage the product better going forward. And then Heidi, maybe you can, and then there's also like an online mapping issue that allows consumers to know where they can go to take their paint when they have it.
Right. Yeah, we use a GIS system to determine where we need to have all of the drop-off locations and make sure that we meet our convenience requirement. And that GIS system feeds really easily into a website which allows consumers to search where's the closest drop-off location for them.
Heidi, so I may have missed this, but when you're trying to get a retailer or someone to be a drop-off location, what incentive is there for them? I know what the incentive is for the municipality, but what is there for a paint, like a hardware store?
Right. So it's completely voluntary. No retailer is required to participate and be a drop-off location. So every retailer is required to do a couple of things. They're required to assess the fee on every can of architectural paint, and they are required to give a consumer information about where that paint can be taken if there's some left over when they're done with their project. And we provide all of that information to every retailer. A large amount of information. But really the incentive for retailers to join our program and to become a drop-off location is a couple of things. It helps foot traffic. So it brings people into their store. Most people don't walk into a store and walk back out without buying things. So even if they didn't sell the paint, if a consumer bought a paint somewhere else, they could take it to a drop-off location and look around that store. So we do have a lot of retailers who indicate they get increased foot traffic. Retailers really do appreciate the value-added service for their customers and that they're building loyalty in their customer base. So it's been very positively received in our states, pretty uniformly across the country. I mean, every once in a while we have a retailer who may not have enough storage space for a bin and has issues with that, and may want to be a drop-off location, but ultimately we figure out that that's just not possible because they just don't have the room to collect the product. But for the most part, all of our retailers are pretty happy with this program.
I think, Lily, you had a question.
Thank you. This sounds like a very exciting program. I did have one question. Do we have any sense of what percentage of paint that's sold goes into this program?
We do, and I'm probably not the best person to give you that information, but let me tell you what sort of our conundrum is with this. So we do get estimates, as I said, when we're trying to figure out how to get this program off the ground and we have to develop our budget, we are trying to figure out how much paint is going to be sold in the state of Maryland. So we do have some figures on that. And obviously at the end of a program year, we have real numbers as to what was sold in the state that year. What we don't know is how many consumers, number one, actually used up all of the product and didn't need to return paint, or how many consumers ended up with half a can and decide they're going to keep that for 2 or 3 years or 20 years in their basement or their garage because they're going to do other projects or touch up or anything else. So we have some numbers, but we're not ever really comparing apples to apples in that particular issue. So that's a hard question for us. And my executive director could actually answer that a lot better than I can. But that is really our problem. It's not so much the paint sold that particular year that's at issue. It's the paint that was sold last year and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And believe me, it's not unusual for us to get cans of paint that are 20 years old and 25 years old. That's one of the reasons why we're still getting oil-based paint.
Is paint labeled with the date such that that could be examined, in a study?
No, it is not, and definitely not legacy paint,
Right.
years ago or 10 years ago.
So Heidi, you said your executive director has maybe some of this information. Is there a way to get some of that and send it back to the Martha to give to the members?
Absolutely. I will definitely ask Marjane to put that down in words that will be more clear than what I can explain.
And also if there's differences between states and how that might relate to implementation.
There are definitely differences in states. And our executive director will tell you that one of the things that is indicative of sort of the culture or the personality of a state is how robust the current infrastructure is. So if your residents, if your consumers are already well educated in recycling strategies, and if there are recycling opportunities for other commodities and things like that, it makes our job a little bit easier, and we see a program go up in gallons collected much faster. So 2 examples of that was Minnesota and Vermont. Both Minnesota and Vermont had sort of very well-developed recycling infrastructure. And when we started our programs in those states, I mean, we just had paint coming in like crazy, which we had not seen in other states. So, you know, we really had to struggle to get our program up and running a lot faster in those states than we did in others.
This is Martha. Certainly, you must have some numbers on how much paint was being collected in the state before the program versus after. Is that a number that's not available? I know that people use up their paint, and that's one reason they wouldn't bring it back, but it seems to me people that are holding off their 20 years of paint there in the basement might be more inclined when it's so convenient.
I don't think we have very good numbers on the waste stream for paint prior to our programs going in. We would be if we had it, I know we'd be collecting that from the municipalities. I mean, that's one of the first things that our executive director will do is start visiting the municipalities to kind of, you know, ferret out that particular issue. How much are you currently collecting?
Interesting. I also wanted to know about the municipalities and counties. Do you have any good examples from states that already have this, of their savings, like actual measurement of how much they're saving?
I relayed the information about Colorado. I believe that was Boulder County who saw savings increase from 130,000 in the first year of our program to 170,000 in the 3rd year of the program. I believe those numbers are correct. And I do have some numbers for other locations. In New Jersey, actually I've been working in New Jersey for a couple of years to pass this bill, and I have some information from Bergen County. And they are estimating in Bergen County that they're going to save $250,000 once this program is up and running.
That would be a really, those would be great numbers if you could get a table of examples like that of where localities have saved money. I was just wondering from Delegate Boyce, what was the position of the Maryland Municipal League and the Maryland Association of Counties on this bill last time? Did they?
I don't think they were the issue. I think the issue was the Retailers Association, if I remember correctly. I don't think they had a position. Am I right, Pam?
Right. Well, and I can join in. There were certain counties and municipalities that weighed in, like, for instance, Baltimore City supported the bill. Usually on issues like this, MACO and MML do not get involved unless their jurisdictions, a certain majority of their jurisdictions have brought it to the organization to consider. So individual bills themselves may or may not, unless it had something that required the county or municipality to do something. And I think because the program works with the counties, some counties are interested and some counties, but it's not a MACO MML issue in the same way that others where you're mandating certain county participation.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to the chat. There's a question about whether or not the actual paint cans themselves are recycled in this process.
Good question. Obviously, we're not collecting the paint without collecting the paint cans. So the way our program works is, we set up this collection of drop-off sites. Those are all manned by either the municipalities that are currently running them or the retail staff. They're actually paint care employees don't ever really touch cans of paint unless we're running one of our paint only events in a rural area. But so all of that collected material is then picked up by a transporter, and it is then sent to a processor where the paint waste is hopefully recycled and the disposition taken care of. All of the cans that we collect, we have more success in some states than others in recycling them. We are very committed to recycling the cans, so we're doing our best to do so. We're having more success on the East Coast in recycling paint cans than we are on the West Coast, but that is part of the program. I mean, we make that part of our contract with the transporter and the processor that those cans need to be recycled as much as humanly possible.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. We have another part of our agenda that has to do with the foam ban. So we're going to, yeah, they're polystyrene foam ban. Does anyone else have any questions that especially hasn't asked? Unmute yourself.
There was a question that wasn't answered. It was a question about how long can paint sit and still be considered usable? Because as so I think Amy was saying she has quite a few in her basement. And again, I alluded to the 20 cans that also include a stain in my basement.
Yeah, and there's no, I don't have a good answer for that. It really is going to depend upon each particular formula of paint and how well it's been stored and under what conditions it's been stored. If it's been, if it's in a storage location that is subject to the weather, and it goes through winter, and then it goes through an August, and then it goes through another winter, and then it goes through August, you may see changes in the formula. You may see, sort of that freeze-thaw problem that I've alluded to a couple of times. That makes a paint unusable. But I've had consumers tell us that they've had a can of paint that they've been opening and using for more than 5 years, and some even longer. So it really depends. It really depends.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this presentation. And I think we have a copy of the PowerPoint we can share, and we have recorded your presentation. So we're going to be able to share it with a lot more people.
Thank you so much for having us and taking interest in this legislation.
It looks quite promising, actually. We're very interested in extended producer responsibility. So thank you very much for sponsoring it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Delegate Boyce.
You're quite welcome.